I asked ChatGPT, would the United States be a better place with less crime if we enforced eye for an eye punishments? ChatGPT said, the idea of enforcing eye for an eye punishments, which is rooted in the ancient legal principle of retribution, raises complex moral, ethical, and practical questions about justice, human rights, and the long-term effects on society. Here's a breakdown of the potential impact of such a system. 1. Deterrence of crime. Argument 4. Proponents might argue that harsher, immediate punishments would deter people from committing crimes, knowing they would face severe and direct consequences for their actions. Argument against. Research generally shows that the likelihood of getting caught is a stronger deterrent than the severity of the punishment. Some studies suggest that extreme punishments, such as the death penalty, don't necessarily lower crime rates. 2. Justice versus revenge. Argument 4. Some see eye for an eye as delivering justice because the punishment directly reflects the harm done. In a system that seeks symmetry in punishment, there's a sense of fairness that could be satisfying for victims. Argument against. Many modern justice systems focus on rehabilitation and preventing future harm rather than exacting revenge. Enforcing harsh punishments can foster cycles of violence and may not address the root causes of crime, such as poverty, addiction, or mental health issues. 3. Human rights concerns. Argument against. Enforcing eye for an eye can easily violate human rights principles. For instance, punishing theft by cutting off hands or responding to murder with execution could be seen as inhumane and barbaric by modern standards. Such policies would likely face strong opposition from human rights advocates and could damage a country's reputation globally. 4. Potential for mistakes. Argument against. The criminal justice system is not infallible. Mistakes in the system, such as wrongful convictions, could result in irreversible harm if the punishment is too severe. In a system where the consequences are as extreme as the crime itself, the stakes are extremely high. 5. Impact on society. Argument against. A society that embraces harsh, retributive justice may become more desensitized to violence. This could erode empathy and compassion within the community, making it harder to create a culture that prioritizes understanding and rehabilitation. In conclusion, while some believe that harsher, direct punishments would reduce crime, evidence suggests that a more balanced approach focusing on rehabilitation, prevention, and addressing social issues tends to create better long-term outcomes. A strictly retributive system may end up causing more harm than good, contributing to a cycle of violence rather than reducing it. You said, does the argument against deterrence of crime have validity? ChatGPT said, yes, the argument against the deterrent effect of harsh punishments does have validity, and it's backed by various studies in criminology and psychology. Here's why. 1. Severity versus certainty of punishment. Research has consistently shown that certainty of being caught is a much more effective deterrent than the severity of punishment. If potential offenders believe there's a high chance they will be caught and punished, they're more likely to avoid committing the crime, regardless of how severe the punishment is. A classic study by criminologist Daniel Nagin and others has shown that increasing the severity of punishment has little impact on reducing crime rates, but increasing the certainty of punishment does. 2. Psychological factors. Many crimes, especially violent ones, are often committed impulsively or under emotional distress, where the offender may not be thinking about the potential consequences. In such cases, the severity of punishment wouldn't have much of a deterrent effect because the crime wasn't premeditated with a rational cost-benefit analysis. For repeat offenders, factors such as addiction, poverty, and mental health issues are significant drivers of criminal behavior. Simply increasing the punishment wouldn't address these underlying causes, reducing the potential for deterrence. 3. Effectiveness of harsh punishments. There's limited evidence to suggest that extreme forms of punishment, such as the death penalty, lower crime rates more than less severe alternatives like life imprisonment. In fact, many studies have shown that jurisdictions with the death penalty do not have significantly lower murder rates than those without it. A 2009 National Research Council report found that the death penalty does not deter crime more effectively than other forms of punishment. This challenges the notion that harsher penalties lead to reduced crime. 4. Rehabilitation versus punishment. Countries with more rehabilitative approaches to justice, such as Norway and Sweden, tend to have much lower recidivism, repeat offense rates than countries that focus on severe punishment, like the United States. This suggests that addressing the root causes of crime and focusing on rehabilitation can be more effective in preventing future crimes than relying on harsh retribution. 5. Human behavior and crime deterrence theory assumes that people make rational decisions when it comes to crime, weighing the risks and rewards. But in reality, many criminals don't operate this way. Crimes of passion, gang violence, and crimes committed under the influence of drugs or alcohol rarely involve rational thought about future punishment. In sum, while harsh punishments may intuitively seem like they would deter crime, the research shows that the certainty of punishment and addressing root causes of criminal behavior are far more important in reducing crime. The argument against deterrence based on severity is well supported by data and real-world outcomes. You said, how can we best implement certainty of punishment and address the root causes of criminal behavior? ChatGPT said, to best implement certainty of punishment and address the root causes of criminal behavior, a comprehensive approach involving reforms to law enforcement, the judicial system, and social support programs is required. Here's a breakdown of key strategies for both. 1. Enhancing certainty of punishment. The goal here is to ensure that criminals believe they will be caught and appropriately punished, without necessarily increasing the severity of punishment. A. Improve law enforcement practices. Increase police presence in high-crime areas. Strategically deploying officers to crime-prone neighborhoods can increase the likelihood of apprehending criminals. Community policing models can also help build trust, leading to more cooperation between the community and law enforcement. Utilize technology for crime prevention. Surveillance technology, e.g., cameras, gunshot detection systems, and predictive policing software, can increase the speed of response and improve the chances of catching offenders. However, these systems must be implemented with transparency to avoid over-policing or violating civil rights. Swift investigation and processing. Law enforcement and judicial systems should work efficiently to investigate crimes and process offenders quickly, so potential criminals understand that justice will be swift and certain. Delays in prosecution or sentencing undermine the deterrent effect. B. Increase police training and accountability. Training on de-escalation and bias reduction. Effective and fair policing improves community trust, making it more likely for crimes to be reported and solved. Better trained officers will also be more adept at preventing crime and engaging with high-risk individuals. Improving accountability, strengthening internal review processes, and ensuring that officers who engage in misconduct are held accountable will boost public trust. More cooperation between law enforcement and the public makes it easier to gather intelligence and solve cases, raising the certainty of punishment for criminal acts. C. Reform the justice system. Reduce backlogs in courts. Streamlining court procedures and reducing unnecessary delays ensures that offenders are processed promptly, which reinforces the idea that crime will lead to quick punishment. Improve case clearance rates. The rate at which crimes are solved, clearance rate, is a key indicator of certainty. Investing in resources to investigate crimes and enhance case resolutions, e.g., more detectives, forensic resources, and legal support, ensures more offenders are apprehended and convicted. Alternatives to incarceration for minor crimes. For non-violent offenses, alternatives like fines, community service, or rehabilitation programs can ensure that punishment is swift and certain while avoiding the negative social consequences of imprisonment. 2. Addressing the root causes of criminal behavior. Many crimes stem from systemic issues like poverty, inequality, lack of education, and mental health problems. Tackling these issues helps prevent crime at its source. A. Invest in education and economic opportunities. Early childhood education. Providing access to quality education for children in underserved communities helps break the cycle of poverty and crime. Research has shown that individuals with higher levels of education are less likely to engage in criminal activity. Job training and employment programs. Creating job opportunities, especially for high-risk populations, such as formerly incarcerated individuals, can reduce the incentive to engage in crime. Government and nonprofits can offer skills training and job placement services to individuals from disadvantaged backgrounds. Economic support programs. Social safety nets, such as housing assistance, food programs, and financial aid for families in poverty, help alleviate the desperation that can lead to criminal activity. B. Expand mental health and substance abuse services. Mental health support. Many individuals in the criminal justice system suffer from untreated mental health conditions. Expanding access to affordable mental health services, particularly in high-crime areas, can help address some of the underlying causes of criminal behavior. Substance abuse treatment programs. A significant portion of criminal activity is related to drug use and addiction. Expanding drug treatment programs both in and out of prison can reduce recidivism and prevent future crimes. Crisis intervention. Programs that deploy social workers, mental health professionals, and crisis intervention teams can help diffuse situations before they escalate into criminal acts. Cities like Denver and Eugene, Oregon, have successfully implemented such programs. C. Community development and violence prevention programs. Community-based programs. Programs that offer mentorship, after-school activities, and support for at-risk youth have been shown to reduce crime. These programs provide alternatives to joining gangs or engaging in criminal behavior. Violence interruption. Initiatives. Programs like Cure Violence or Operation Peacemaker Fellowship engage individuals who are at high risk of committing or being victims of violence. They use mediation and social support to prevent violent incidents before they happen. Strengthening family and social networks. Programs that support parents, offer family counseling, and provide childcare can help prevent young people from getting involved in criminal activity. Strong family and community support networks reduce the risk of individuals becoming involved in crime. D. Prison reform and rehabilitation. Rehabilitation programs in prisons. Instead of focusing solely on punishment, prisons should offer education, vocational training, mental health support, and substance abuse treatment. When inmates are released with more skills and better mental health, they are less likely to reoffend. Reduce recidivism. Providing transitional support for former prisoners, such as housing assistance, job placement services, and continued counseling, can help them reintegrate into society and reduce the likelihood of returning to crime. Conclusion. To best implement certainty of punishment and address the root causes of crime, society must invest in smarter law enforcement practices, a more efficient justice system, and comprehensive social programs that tackle poverty, mental health, and education. Focusing on prevention through economic opportunity and rehabilitation, rather than just punishment, can create a safer, more just society in the long term. You said, why haven't we done these things, or what is holding us back? ChatGPT said, the failure to fully implement policies that focus on certainty of punishment and address the root causes of criminal behavior stems from a variety of complex, interrelated factors. These include political, economic, social, and cultural challenges that hinder systemic change. Here are some of the key reasons. 1. Political and policy barriers. A. Tough-on-crime mentality. Over the past few decades, especially in the U.S., there has been a prevailing tough-on-crime mindset. This approach emphasizes punitive measures such as long prison sentences, mandatory minimums, and the war on drugs. Politicians often fear that appearing soft on crime could hurt their chances of election or re-election, making them reluctant to propose or support reforms that prioritize rehabilitation or systemic change. The tough-on-crime rhetoric appeals to public fear and simplifies crime control to harsher punishments, ignoring the complexity of crime prevention and the root causes of criminal behavior. B. Partisan gridlock. Criminal justice reform has become a highly politicized issue, with one side often focusing on law and order, and the other on reform and rehabilitation. In the U.S., for example, this partisanship leads to gridlock and prevents the passage of comprehensive reform bills. Even when there's bipartisan agreement on specific issues, like reducing mass incarceration, larger systemic reforms can stall due to political polarization. 2. Economic and funding challenges. A. High costs of social programs. Implementing large-scale programs to address the root causes of crime, such as improving education, increasing mental health services, and expanding job training, requires significant upfront investment. While these programs might save money in the long term by reducing crime and incarceration, the initial costs can be a barrier. Politicians often prioritize short-term budget concerns and are reluctant to allocate funds for long-term preventive solutions that won't show immediate results. In some cases, they may be more willing to fund law enforcement and prisons because the effects of those measures are more visible. B. Prison industrial complex. The for-profit prison system in the U.S. and other countries creates financial incentives to maintain high levels of incarceration. Private prison companies, lobbyists, and even certain labor unions can resist reforms that would reduce prison populations. This creates a conflict of interest, as the prison industrial complex profits from incarceration and may lobby against policies that emphasize alternatives like rehabilitation and treatment. C. Short-term focus in policymaking. Governments often focus on short-term solutions that provide immediate benefits, such as increased policing or harsher sentencing, rather than long-term investments in social services and prevention. Since elected officials are judged on what they achieve during their term, they may not prioritize programs that will take years or decades to fully show results. 3. Social and cultural challenges. A. Public opinion and fear of crime often drives public demand for stricter penalties and more policing. Politicians respond to this fear with policies that appear tough but may not be effective in reducing crime. Reform policies that focus on rehabilitation and addressing root causes can be a harder sell to the public, especially when people are afraid or misinformed. Many people believe that harsher punishment deters crime, despite evidence to the contrary. This makes it difficult to build public support for reforms that are seen as lenient or soft on crime. B. Stigma and lack of empathy. There's a deep-seated stigma against individuals who commit crimes, particularly violent or drug-related offenses. This stigma often leads to a lack of public empathy for rehabilitative efforts or reintegration programs. Many people see punishment as a moral issue and believe that offenders deserve to be punished harshly, regardless of the broader societal benefits of rehabilitation. This moralistic view of crime tends to emphasize retribution over rehabilitation, which makes it difficult to shift toward more compassionate, evidence-based approaches to criminal justice. 4. Institutional resistance to change. Law enforcement resistance. Some sectors of law enforcement resist reform efforts that shift resources away from traditional policing and toward community-based initiatives or social services. This is partly due to entrenched institutional cultures and a fear of losing influence or resources. Police unions, for example, often oppose reforms that they feel undermine the power of law enforcement, such as reducing police presence in favor of social services or increasing accountability for misconduct. B. Bureaucratic inertia. Government institutions are often slow to change due to entrenched systems, rigid hierarchies, and the complexity of coordinating across multiple agencies, police, courts, prisons, social services. Even when reforms are enacted, implementation can be inconsistent or underfunded due to bureaucratic resistance or lack of coordination. 5. Structural inequality and racial disparities. A. Poverty and inequality. Poverty and inequality are root causes of much criminal behavior, but addressing these issues requires major social reforms, including economic redistribution, affordable housing, access to health care, and education reform. These challenges are immense and require coordinated long-term efforts, which are difficult to achieve in a politically fragmented environment. Many policymakers view addressing these systemic issues as beyond the scope of criminal justice reform and prefer to focus on symptom-based solutions like harsher policing. B. Racial disparities in the justice system. Racial biases in the justice system, such as higher arrest and incarceration rates for people of color, have contributed to systemic distrust between marginalized communities and law enforcement. This distrust makes it harder to build cooperation in crime prevention efforts and implement fairer policies. Efforts to reduce racial disparities through criminal justice reform can be met with resistance or denial from those who benefit from or are invested in maintaining the status quo. 6. Historical context and legacy of punitive justice. A. Legacy of punitive justice. The punitive approach to justice has deep roots in many societies, including the U.S. Historically, punishment has been seen as the primary response to crime, especially for marginalized communities. Changing this mindset requires a fundamental shift in cultural values and beliefs about justice. Many reforms are perceived as threatening to this long-standing system, which makes it difficult to move from retribution toward rehabilitation. B. War on drugs and mass incarceration. The war on drugs and other policies from the 1970s and 1980s significantly increased incarceration rates, particularly among minority populations. Even though these policies have been widely discredited for their inefficacy, their legacy still shapes current criminal justice practices and attitudes toward punishment. Conclusion. The barriers to implementing reforms that prioritize certainty of punishment and address the root causes of crime are multifaceted and deeply ingrained in political, social, and economic structures. Overcoming these challenges requires political courage, public education, and a sustained commitment to long-term reform. Transforming the criminal justice system will also demand broader societal changes, such as reducing inequality, improving education, and expanding social safety nets.